Alright, we are closing in on the end of this unit, so we just have one or two more lessons to go. Today we're talking about quadratic functions. So we talked about linear functions, we've mentioned nonlinear functions. However, nonlinear functions can come in a whole lot of varieties. So today we're going to talk about quadratic functions, and in our final lesson we'll talk about cubic functions and we'll just kind of glimpse at some other things. So a quadratic function is a function written in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. The important thing to recognize, now I'm not going to have you necessarily memorizing that standard form, that's something that you'll focus a little more on in algebra. What I want you to recognize is that there's an x squared. So we have an exponent on a variable. So when you plug something in for x, you're going to square one of those things. The shape the graph is going to give you is what we call a parabola. The graph of a quadratic function. So that parabola is going to be a U-shaped graph. So if I were just to give you an example here, it would be something like this. So notice it's not linear, it's this curved shape that's going upwards like a U, and it could go down too. If I drew a different one, it could go this direction as well. So it can go both ways, it can go up or down, it's just that U-shaped graph. So let's take a look, and really there are other ways to graph these that you'll talk about in algebra and algebra 2. What we are going to do is simply plot some points. So we're just going to pick values for x's, and we're going to plot some points. So example number 1 is going to ask us to graph the function y equals x squared minus 2. So what I'm going to do is we're going to create a table of values. Now the tables, again, the x values are going to be up to us. Then we're also going to have that x squared minus 2. So same idea that we did last time. We're going to pick an x, figure out what is the y, then we're going to get y values, and then we're going to have our coordinates. So the xy coordinate is going to be the last thing that we figure out. So still that same 4-column table format. So x's. Now, a lot of these, they're all going to, as you saw, they all have that curvature shape. You want to get points on both sides of the curve. Because if you only get it on one side, you don't know where it curves and how it curves. Because that's going to change depending upon the function. So it's important for us to choose both positive and negative numbers. Okay? Most of these graphs are going to curve around -1, 0, and 1. Most of the time around 0. So I would start by choosing -2. Then we'll go to -1, 0, 1, and 2. So we're just going to go that direction when we'll see where it curves, because it's going to curve. So it comes down, hits the bottom, and when it comes back up, it's symmetrical. It's going to hit the same values, and you're going to see it decrease, 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 increase, increase, increase. Okay? So -2, we plug it in, so we get -2 squared minus 2. Well, -2 times -2 is a positive 2, or positive 4, excuse me, minus 2. So my y value is 2, and we have a coordinate of -2, 2. Let's go ahead and do -1. So -1 squared minus 2. So -1 times -1 is a positive 1, minus 2 is a -1. So we get a -1, -1. Now if I plug in a 0, 0 times 0 is 0, minus 2. It's going to give us a -2. So we're still decreasing 2 to -1 down to -2. So this point is 0, -2. When I plug in a 1, 1 times 1 is 1, minus 2 is a -1. Now we've hit the turning point. So now we've started to go back up again, and we get a positive 1, -1. We should get, since we got a 2 with this one, we should get a 2 down here. So let's check and make sure that we do. 4 minus 2 gives us 2. So we end up with that same 2 again. So this time it is 2, 2. Now it's time to plot these points and to see what this graph looks like. So I'm just going to sketch them here. If you have graph paper, it's best if you use that because that way you can be very neat and intentional with your plotting. If you don't, you can sketch them like I am. So we'll start with negative 2, 2. So negative 2, positive 2. Then we go negative 1, 1. I'm sorry, negative 1, negative 1. I was like, that doesn't look right. Negative 1, negative 1. 0, negative 2. And 1, negative 1. And 2, 2. Now, we do not create a V. We do not just do straight lines. These are curved lines. So what I do is I start at the bottom and I curve it up like this. Then we'll go to the other side and we'll curve it up like this. Okay? So you do not want to just go straight out because those are not going to give you the right graph. It is curved. Mine's a little off. So I'm just going to make these a little bit bigger so my points all hit. And that's the graph of our first parabola. Let's go ahead and do another one. So you'll need to redraw the table. I'm going to keep my table. We're just going to put a new equation in here. So all of this will stay. Some of this will stay the same. Now redraw the graph. Alright, so this time our equation is just going to be a negative x squared. Now, the important thing here, that negative is outside the x squared. We do not square it away. So when I pick a negative 2, we're going to have negative 2 squared. So what do we get? Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, but it's negative, so we're actually going to get a negative 4. So the negative 2, negative 4. So when I pick a negative 1, we have that negative sign out front, and then we have the negative 1 squared. Well, that gives me a positive 1, make it negative, so it's a negative 1. So we're at negative 1, negative 1. So notice also, this time we're increasing to start. So we're looking for when do we start to decrease. Plug in a 0. 0 squared is just 0, positive or negative. So this point is going to hit 0, 0. Still increasing. Plug in a 1. 1 squared is 1, make it negative. So now we're going back down again, and we get 1, negative 1. So when we do the 2, 2 squared is 4, make it negative. So negative 4. So then we're back to 2, negative 4. So let's go ahead and plot these points. Alright, so we have negative 2, negative 4. It's all the way down here. We have negative 1, negative 1. Then we have 0, 0. Then we have 1, negative 1. And then we go back down to 2, negative 4. Do my curves. And that's our parabola. This time, shooting downwards. So it's more like an umbrella than a U shape. And that's all that there is for quadratics. So that's as far as we're going to take it. We will again do some practice in class. But that is the essence of what I want you to walk away with, is just how to graph it basically on a very, very basic level. And then you'll get to the more complex and some of the easier methods of graphing quadratics when you get to algebra and algebra 2.